Welcome, dear listener, to a gentle journey through the rich history of the Elder Scrolls. Tonight, we'll be exploring the events that set the stage for the Elder Scrolls BEFORE Oblivion, a tale of emperors and Daedra, of prophecies and sacrifices. My voice will guide you through the mists of time in Tamriel, revealing the hidden paths that led to one of gaming's most beloved adventures. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the ancient stories of Cyrodiil wash over you as you drift towards sleep. Long before you first stepped through the prison cell in the Imperial City, the world of Tamriel was already in motion, spinning a web of events that would eventually ensnare you as the hero of Kvatch. The tale of Oblivion begins where its predecessor, Morrowind, concludes. In the volcanic island of Vardenfell, far to the northeast of Cyrodiil, another hero had fulfilled an ancient prophecy. This Nerevarine, as they were called in prophecy, had defeated Daedric, a former friend turned power-hungry demigod who threatened to spread a terrible blight across all of Tamriel. The defeat of Daedric marked the end of the Tribunal's divinity. 3 mortal elves who had used the power of the Heart of Lorcan to achieve godhood thousands of years prior. Vivek, the poet-warrior of the Tribunal, gradually began to lose his divine powers. His floating city, held aloft for centuries by his magic, would eventually crash into the waters below, with devastating consequences. These events in Morrowind created ripples through the invisible fabric that separates the mortal realm from oblivion. The weakening of divine barriers, the fulfillment of one prophecy, these things often herald the beginning of another cosmic shift. The Daedric princes, those powerful beings who rule the plains of oblivion, watch the mortal realm constantly, waiting for opportunities, and one among them had been planning his invasion for millennia. To understand the events of Oblivion, we must first understand its primary antagonist, Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric Prince of Destruction, Revolution, Energy, and Ambition. Unlike mortals, who are born and die within the flow of time, Daedric princes are eternal beings, existing since the very dawn of creation. Mehrunes Dagon's realm is the Deadlands, a nightmarish landscape of fire, lava, and blackened, twisted towers reaching toward crimson skies. Those who have glimpsed it and returned speak of constant warfare, of storms that rain fire, and of an atmosphere thick with the scent of brimstone and ash. But Dagon was not always as we know him. In the distant mythic past, created in the bowels of Lig, transformed through ancient and obscure rituals into the Prince of Destruction. This transformation instilled in him an eternal desire to overthrow order, to bring revolution to stagnant realms, and to destroy what others have built. Mehrunes Dagon had attempted to invade Tamriel several times throughout history, most notably during the Second Era in an event known as the Fourscore War. Each attempt was thwarted, often at great cost to the mortal realm, but Dagon is patient, a quality that may seem at odds with his destructive nature. For thousands of years, he waited and watched, searching for weaknesses in the barriers between worlds. The dragonfires, lit by the Septim emperors upon their coronation, formed the primary shield against invasion from oblivion. And so, Dagon's attention turned to the imperial family, to the bloodline of dragonborn rulers whose very existence kept him at bay. Let us turn now to Emperor Uriel Septim VII, whose death you witness in the opening moments of Oblivion. By the time you meet him, he is an old man, his face weathered by time and tragedy, his eyes carrying the weight of a difficult reign. But his life was long and eventful before that fateful encounter in the prison escape route. The early years of his reign were marked by prosperity and peace, guided by the steady hand of his imperial battle mage, Jagar Tharn. Unbeknownst to the young emperor, Tharn harbored dark ambitions. In what would later be called the Imperial Simulacrum, Jagar Tharn betrayed the emperor, imprisoning him in a realm of oblivion and assuming his identity through illusion magic. For 10 years, Tharn ruled in Uriel's place, while the true emperor suffered in the darkness of oblivion. When finally rescued by an unknown hero, the protagonist of the Elder Scrolls, Arena, Uriel returned to find his empire in disarray. Provinces had grown independent, nobles had consolidated power, and the unity of the empire had begun to fracture. These 10 lost years changed Uriel profoundly. The once trusting emperor became more cautious, more attentive to the whispers of prophecy and fate. In his later years, Uriel became increasingly preoccupied with dreams and visions. He consulted with the Elder Council less frequently, relying instead on a network of spies and agents known as the Blades. Through them, he manipulated events from the shadows, guiding the Empire through crises like those depicted in Daggerfall and Morrowind. As the Third Era drew to a close, Uriel's prophetic dreams grew more vivid and troubling. He began to see the signs of his own impending death, and more disturbingly, the threats that would follow. This foresight led him to arrange certain contingencies, one of which was ensuring that the mysterious prisoner in the Imperial City dungeons would be present on the day of his assassination. As we continue our journey through the rich tapestry of lore that precedes the events of the Elder Scrolls IV, Oblivion, let us turn our attention to the divine beings whose influence permeates every aspect of Imperial life. The 9 divines stand as the central pillars of religious faith throughout Cyrodiil and much of Tamriel, their worship woven deeply into the cultural fabric of the Empire. Rest comfortably as we explore these celestial guardians whose blessings you may have sought at wayside shrines during your adventures through the Heartland province. The worship of the divines in Cyrodiil has roots that stretch back to the earliest days of human civilization. Before the rise of Saint Alessia and her rebellion against the Ayleid slave masters, humans worshipped a complex pantheon of gods, many borrowed or adapted from elvish traditions. When Alessia established the First Empire, she faced a delicate religious challenge. Her Nordic allies from Skyrim brought with them their own pantheon of gods, while many Cyrodiils had adopted elements of elven worship. With remarkable wisdom, Alessia created a syncretic faith that would unite her diverse followers. She established what was originally known as the 8 Divines, a carefully selected group of deities that represented aspects from both human and elven traditions. This political and spiritual compromise helped cement the foundations of the new empire, giving its citizens a common religious framework while respecting their diverse origins. The 8 became 9 much later, during the reign of Tiber Septim at the end of the Second Era. After his death, Tiber Septim, who had united all of Tamriel under one banner for the first time in history, was elevated to godhood, taking the divine name Talos. This apotheosis was controversial, particularly among elven populations, who rejected the idea that a human could ascend to divinity. But within the Empire proper, the 9 divines became the standard of worship. Akatosh, the dragon god of time. Often depicted as a great dragon or as a robed man with a dragon's head, Akatosh represents endurance, invincibility, and eternal vigilance. As the first of the gods to form in the Dawn era, he is considered the greatest of the divines and the ultimate protector of the Cyrodiilic people. Akatosh's covenant with Saint Alessia established the Dragonfires and the Amulet of Kings, making him particularly central to imperial religious and political legitimacy. The priests of Akatosh teach that he embodies the qualities of endurance and stability, encouraging followers to persevere through hardship with the knowledge that time heals all wounds. The great temple of Akatosh in the imperial city contains an hourglass said to have been running continuously since the founding of the First Empire. Worshippers often wear amulets depicting a dragon, and nobles sometimes claim distant kinship to the god through the dragon-blood emperors. His blessing is sought by those who wish for longer life or greater patience. In the northern city of Bruma, where Nordic influence is strong, Akatosh is sometimes called Bormahu, or Father of Time. The exact relationship between Akatosh and the Nordic time god Alduin remains a matter of theological debate among scholars, though most imperial priests insist they are separate entities. Arche, god of the cycle of life and death. Arche oversees the transitions between life and death, birth and burial. Depicted as a robed figure holding scales, he is both comforter and judge, ensuring that the natural order of mortality remains balanced. His priests conduct funeral rites throughout the empire and maintain the hallowed grounds where the dead are laid to rest. The temples of Arche are known for their quiet dignity and somber beauty. Within their walls, priests prepare the dead for burial according to ancient rites, binding spirits to their remains to prevent necromantic tampering. These halls often contain extensive records of births and deaths, making them valuable resources for genealogical research. Followers of Arche often wear amulets containing a small amount of grave dirt from an ancestor's burial site. His blessing is sought by those mourning loved ones, women in childbirth, and anyone seeking to make peace with their own mortality. The priests teach that death is not an end, but a transition, and that Arche guides souls to their appropriate afterlives based on the lives they led. In times of plague or war, when proper burial rites cannot be performed for all the dead, priests of Arche travel with mobile shrines to consecrate mass graves and prevent the rise of undead. This practical service has made the clergy of Arche respected even in the most remote villages of the empire. Dibella, goddess of beauty and love. Dibella embodies beauty, art, and affection in all their forms. Her temples, known as Houses of Dibella, are adorned with exquisite sculptures, paintings, and tapestries. She is typically portrayed as a young woman of extraordinary beauty, often partially draped in flowing fabric. The priestesses of Dibella, for they are predominantly women, serve as patrons of the arts, sponsoring musicians, painters, and poets throughout Cyrodiil. They maintain that the creation and appreciation of beauty is a form of worship, elevating the spirit and connecting mortals to divine inspiration. While outsiders sometimes misunderstand the Dibellan faith as merely focused on physical pleasure. True devotees know that Dibella's teachings encompass a much broader understanding of beauty, the harmony of form and function, the power of aesthetic excellence to inspire and elevate, and the sacredness of love in all its manifestations. In Cyrodiil, many young couples seek Dibella's blessing before marriage, and artisans often place small shrines to her in their workshops. Her amulets typically feature a stylized female figure or a sensuous curve that represents the goddess's appreciation for the beauty of form. Those who seek her blessing hope for inspiration, grace in expression, or fulfillment in love. Julianos, god of wisdom and logic. Julianos governs the realms of literature, law, history, and contradiction. Depicted as an elderly man with a book and quill, he represents the power of reason and the importance of recording knowledge. His followers believe that wisdom is a divine gift that must be cultivated through study and contemplation. The temples of Julianos often contain extensive libraries and serve as centers of learning throughout the empire. Many such temples maintain schools where children of all social classes can receive basic education. The more prestigious temples of Julianos host advanced academies where scholars pursue research in various fields of study. Priests of Julianos are recognizable by their blue robes decorated with star patterns representing the constellations, symbols of the ordered universe that the god oversees. They serve as teachers, archivists, and legal advisors in communities throughout Cyrodiil. The god's blessing is sought by students before examinations, judges before rendering verdicts, and scholars embarking on difficult research. The College of Whispers and the Synod, two influential magical organizations that would rise to prominence after the dissolution of the Mages Guild. Both claim Julianos as their patron, though they interpret his teachings in markedly different ways. This reflects the god's appreciation for dialectic and the refinement of ideas through debate. Kinnereth, goddess of air, wind, and the elements. Kinnereth, sometimes called Kine in the north, is the goddess of the heavens, the winds, and the natural elements. Unlike most other divines who are worshipped primarily in temples, Kinnereth's followers often prefer outdoor shrines set in natural locations of particular beauty or power. She is depicted as a woman surrounded by birds, her robes billowing as if caught in a perpetual breeze. As goddess of the sky, she is particularly important to sailors, farmers, and travelers who depend on favorable weather for their livelihoods and safety. The priests of Kinnereth wear green robes and often serve as healers, using restoration magic along with herbal remedies to cure ailments. They teach that breathing clean air in natural settings can restore both physical and spiritual health. Many of Tamriel's most skilled healers train at the Temple of Kinnereth in Whiterun, though branches of their healing tradition can be found throughout Cyrodiil as well. Followers of Kinnereth are often involved in conservation efforts, working to preserve natural spaces from overdevelopment. They maintain that Kinnereth was instrumental in creating mortals by breathing life onto the land that Lorcan had created. Her blessing is sought for safe travels, favorable weather, and recovery from illness. Mara, goddess of love and compassion. While Dibella governs passion and beauty, Mara represents love in its more nurturing aspects, maternal love, compassion, and charity. She is depicted as a woman of middle years with open, welcoming arms. Her temples serve as orphanages, almshouses, and sanctuaries for the homeless and abused. Marriage ceremonies throughout the empire are typically performed by priests or priestesses of Mara, who bind couples together under the goddess's watchful eye. These ceremonies range from elaborate rituals for nobility to simple blessings for common folk, but all include the exchange of enchanted rings that symbolize the eternal nature of true love. The faithful wear amulets depicting a stylized woman with arms outstretched. Her clerics teach that love is both the origin of creation and its ultimate purpose, that through loving acts of kindness and compassion, mortals draw closest to divine nature. They maintain soup kitchens in most major cities and offer shelter to those in need. During the Oblivion Crisis, the temples of Mara played a crucial role in organizing refugee relief and providing care for those displaced by Daedric attacks. This practical expression of their theological principles earned them increased respect and support in the aftermath of the crisis. Stendarr, God of Mercy and Justice. Stendarr represents the divine balance between justice and mercy, punishment tempered with compassion, strength exercised with restraint. He is typically depicted as a bearded man holding scales in one hand and an open palm in the other, symbolizing his dual nature as judge and comforter. His followers, particularly the militant order known as the Vigilance of Stendarr, stand opposed to Daedric influence in the mortal world. They are trained to recognize and counter Daedric possession, cursed objects, and malevolent magic. While maintaining their headquarters in Skyrim, the Vigilants maintain chapels throughout Cyrodiil, where those afflicted by dark magic can seek cleansing and healing. The blessing of Stendarr is sought by those facing judgment, whether in courts of law or in personal matters of conscience. His priests serve as advocates for the accused, ensuring fair treatment under imperial law. They also work to reform the imperial prison system, believing that punishment without the opportunity for redemption violates the god's teachings. Followers of Stendarr often wear amulets depicting a shield or an open hand. During the Oblivion Crisis, many joined defensive militias or provided sanctuary to those threatened by Daedric forces, seeing this as a natural extension of their commitment to protect the innocent from supernatural harm. Zenithar, God of Work and Commerce. Zenithar embodies the value of honest work, fair trade, and material prosperity earned through diligence. Depicted as a bearded man with a hammer or scales, he is particularly beloved by craftsmen, merchants, and laborers throughout the empire. His temples often resemble guild halls more than traditional places of worship, with workshops, trading floors, and arbitration chambers where commercial disputes can be resolved. Priests of Zenithar help negotiate fair contracts, set reasonable prices during shortages, and teach vocational skills to the young or unemployed. Followers wear amulets depicting a hammer or anvil and believe that hard work is itself a form of worship. The faithful are encouraged to perfect their crafts, deal honestly in all transactions, and share their prosperity through fair wages and charitable contributions. Unlike some other faiths that emphasize withdrawal from worldly concerns, the worship of Zenithar celebrates material achievement as evidence of divine favor. During economic hardships, temples of Zenithar organize public works projects, providing employment while improving infrastructure. This practical approach to faith has made Zenithar particularly popular among Cyrodiil's growing middle class of artisans and merchants. Talos, the ascended god of mankind. The newest addition to the pantheon, Talos represents the apotheosized form of Tiber Septim, the first emperor to unite all of Tamriel under a single banner. His divinity is a matter of faith rather than ancient tradition, making his worship somewhat controversial, particularly among elven populations who reject the idea that a human could achieve godhood. Talos is depicted in imperial iconography as a bearded warrior in armor, often with the Amulet of Kings around his neck and the Numidium, a powerful Dwemer construct he used in his conquests, at his side. His temples celebrate martial virtues alongside governmental service and imperial unity. To his worshippers, Talos represents humanity's potential for greatness, the belief that through extraordinary achievement, mortals can transcend their limitations and reach divine status. His blessing is sought by soldiers before battle, officials before taking office, and anyone undertaking difficult challenges that seem beyond mortal capacity. The Blades, who served as both intelligence agency and bodyguards to the Septim emperors, maintained a special devotion to Talos, seeing their service to his descendants as a continuation of their service to him. Many Blades agents would whisper prayers to Talos before undertaking dangerous missions, believing he took special interest in those who protected his bloodline. The Nine Divines are far more than abstract theological concepts in Cyrodiilic culture. Their influence permeates daily life in myriad ways. The imperial calendar marks festivals dedicated to each divine throughout the year, creating regular rhythms of celebration and remembrance. These holy days are observed with varying degrees of formality across the empire. The birthday of Akatosh brings crowds to temples at dawn to witness the first light of the sun, symbolizing the beginning of time. Dibella's Day sees art competitions and beauty pageants in town squares. The Day of Julianos features public debates and the opening of library collections to all citizens, regardless of station. Beyond formal observances, the divines shape common expressions and social customs. Courtrooms feature small shrines to both Stendar and Julianos, reminding judges to balance mercy with wisdom in their verdicts. Amulets bearing divine symbols are commonly worn by the faithful, each believed to carry a measure of divine blessing. These are not merely decorative, but are imbued with minor enchantments by temple priests. Mara's amulet subtly enhances one's ability to persuade others, while Stendar's grants a small boost to defensive capabilities. Roadside shrines dot the landscape of Cyrodiil, offering travelers places to rest and seek divine blessing. These simple stone markers often feature offerings left by previous visitors, flowers for Dibella, coins for Zenithar, or handwritten prayers for any of the nine. During the Oblivion Crisis, these shrines became even more significant as safe havens in a dangerous landscape. The priesthood of the Nine Divines is organized into a complex, hierarchical structure centered in the Temple of the One in the Imperial City. Each divine has a dedicated high priest or high priestess who oversees worship throughout the province, though considerable autonomy is granted to individual temples. Unlike some faiths that require clergy to withdraw from worldly affairs, priests of the Nine are encouraged to engage with their communities, teaching, healing, counseling, and providing practical assistance to the faithful. They are recognized by their distinctive robes, color-coded to represent their divine patron: gold for Akatosh, green for Kinnereth, blue for Julianos, and so on. Entry into the priesthood typically begins with childhood education at a temple school, followed by a period of formal novitiate beginning around age 16. Initiates study theological texts, learn ritual procedures, and develop skills appropriate to their chosen divine: healing for followers of Kinnereth, artistic techniques for Dibella's acolytes, martial training for Talos initiates. After several years of study and service, novices undergo rites of ordination that vary according to which divine they serve. Those dedicated to Arche spend a night in a tomb, communing with ancestral spirits. Followers of Kinnereth must survive alone in the wilderness for 9 days. Initiates of Stendar participate in a ritual trial where they must demonstrate both strength and restraint. The temples themselves range from grand cathedrals in major cities to humble shrines in rural villages. Architecture typically reflects the nature of the divine being worshipped. Akatosh's temples feature soaring spires and circular motifs representing the passage of time. Kinnereth's shrines often incorporate living trees and open-air elements. Zenithar's temples resemble well-built guild halls with excellent acoustics for public announcements and negotiations. Let us spend some time on the architects of Uriel's demise, the Mythic Dawn. The words alone might now stir a sense of unease as you drift towards sleep. Yet this cult, central to the events of Oblivion, began as most dangerous movements do, with a single visionary whose ideas gradually twisted toward darkness. The cult was founded by Mankar Cameron, a figure whose origins are as complex as the prophecies he espoused. Born into a royal Bosmer family, Cameron was not initially destined for infamy. His early years remained shrouded in mystery, but scholars believe he once studied with the Sijic Order on Artaeum, that mystical island that appears and disappears from the world at will. It was perhaps there that he first encountered forbidden knowledge of the Daedric princes. Mankar's transformation from scholar to cult leader began after he acquired a mysterious artifact, the Mysterium Xarxes, a book written by Mehrunes Dagon himself. The text is said to burn the eyes of untrained readers, its knowledge too terrible for mortal minds. Yet Cameron not only read it, but claimed to understand its deepest meanings. The book became the sacred text of his new religion, and from its cryptic passages, he developed a radical cosmology that turned conventional understanding of Tamriel's creation on its head. The heart of Mankar Cameron's teaching was a promise that seemed impossible to fulfill, a new dawn for his followers. He created, or perhaps was granted, a pocket realm of oblivion called Paradise. This realm, accessible only through the power of the Mysterium Xarxes, was presented as a reward for the faithful, a place where they would be reborn as immortal beings after Mehrunes Dagon cleansed Tamriel with holy fire. Paradise was described to potential converts as a garden of unearthly beauty, where the limitations of mortal flesh would be shed like an outgrown garment. In reality, those who entered found something quite different, a cruel reflection of paradise, where Cameron's immortality came at the price of endless suffering for his followers. The promise of transcendence has always been one of the most powerful tools for those who would lead others into darkness. Many who joined the Mythic Dawn were not evil in any conventional sense. They were seekers who had found the answers offered by the 9 divines insufficient. Some were scholars frustrated by the limitations placed on magical research. Others were those who had suffered and found no comfort in traditional faith. Cameron offered them certainty in an uncertain world, purpose in lives that had lost meaning. What made the Mythic Dawn particularly dangerous was their method of operation. Unlike many Daedric cults that gathered in remote locations, the Dawn operated in plain sight throughout Cyrodiil and beyond. Their members maintained ordinary lives as merchants, laborers, even as nobles or officials within the imperial government itself. They recognized each other through subtle codes and symbols, the most famous being the rising sun emblem that adorned their crimson robes during secret gatherings. The four-armed sunrise represented Mehrunes Dagon's coming dawn after the long night of the Divine's rule. When not in ritual garments, members could identify one another through seemingly innocent phrases and responses that would sound like casual conversation to uninitiated ears. Their meetings took place in secret shrines hidden beneath ordinary buildings, or in caves far from traveled roads. There, they would perform Daedric rituals, study the Mysterium Xarxes, and receive new orders through a network of messengers who answered directly to Cameron himself. This cellular structure meant that most members knew only a handful of others in the organization, a security measure that would prove effective when the Blades began their investigations. As Uriel Septim's prophetic dreams grew more troubling in his final years, the Mythic Dawn accelerated their plans. They had spent decades infiltrating positions of influence throughout the Empire, placing sleeper agents who lived double lives, sometimes for years, before being activated for their true purpose. Their ultimate goal was breathtaking in its ambition: to permanently bring down the barriers between Mundus and Oblivion, allowing Mehrunes Dagon to physically enter the mortal realm, not merely through temporary portals, but as a true and permanent presence. For this to happen, two conditions needed to be met. The dragonfires in the Temple of the One must be extinguished, and the Amulet of Kings, the ancient soul gem of immense power, must be removed from play. The assassins who ended Emperor Uriel Septim's life in those opening moments of Oblivion were not simply killers. They were religious zealots who believed they were ushering in a new age of freedom. Each blow struck against the Emperor and his Blades' protectors was, in their minds, a sacred act. This helps explain their seemingly supernatural determination, their willingness to die in service to their cause. The attack on Kvatch, the first major city to fall to the Daedric invasion, was both a demonstration of power and a targeted strike against Martin Septim, the Emperor's unknown heir. Though the citizens of Kvatch could not have understood why their city was chosen as the first to suffer, it was no random selection. The Mythic Dawn had learned, through means still debated by scholars, that Uriel's last true heir lived there as a humble priest of Akatosh, a delicious irony that would not have been lost on Mankar Cameron. What makes the Mythic Dawn so haunting a presence in Tamriel's history is that they were not monsters in any simple sense. They were people, scholars, workers, nobles, who had been convinced that the world needed to burn so that something better could rise from its ashes. As you drift closer to sleep, consider how thin the line can be between visionary and villain, between prophet and destroyer. Mankar Cameron walked that line and, in his certainty, pulled many others across it with him, setting in motion the events that would require a hero to rise from the most unlikely of places, a prison cell in the Imperial City. The Mythic Dawn reminds us that the most dangerous ideas are often those that contain a kernel of truth wrapped in layers of deception. Their belief that mortality was a prison was not entirely without merit, but their solution brought only greater suffering. In their quest for transcendence, they forgot the value of the world they sought to leave behind, and in their devotion to their master, they became instruments of a destruction they could not truly comprehend. As our journey through the history preceding the universe of the Elder Scrolls continues, we now turn our attention to perhaps the most significant artifact in all of Tamriel's long history, the Amulet of Kings. This ancient relic, glimpsed only briefly in your hands before it was torn away by fate, has a story that stretches back to the very dawn of the Empire itself. Settle deeper into your comfortable rest as we explore the origins, powers, and cosmic significance of this blood-red jewel that stood as the final barrier between Tamriel and the forces of Oblivion. To understand the Amulet of Kings, we must first journey back to the First Era, to a time when humans lived in bondage to their Ayleid overlords. The Ayleids were a race of elves who ruled over Cyrodiil with cruel dominion, practicing dark sorceries and worshipping various Daedric princes who granted them power. Their slaves, the ancestors of the modern Imperials, suffered terribly under their master's cruelty. Into this time of darkness came a young slave woman named Alessia, later known as Saint Alessia, or the Slave Queen. The legends say that she prayed to the divines for deliverance, and her prayers were answered by Akatosh himself, the dragon god of time and chief deity of the Cyrodiilic pantheon. Moved by her suffering and her faith, Akatosh granted Alessia a vision and made with her a solemn covenant. According to ancient texts, such as the Book of the Dragonborn, Akatosh drew his own divine blood and placed it within a great red diamond. This gem became the centerpiece of the Amulet of Kings. In that moment, a mystical pact was formed. So long as Alessia's descendants wore the amulet and kept the dragonfires lit in the Temple of the One, Akatosh would maintain a barrier between Mundus, the mortal realm, and Oblivion, the realm of the Daedra. With divine blessing upon her, Alessia led a rebellion against the Ayleid slave masters. She united the human slaves with unlikely allies, including Nordic warriors from Skyrim and even some Ayleid lords who had rejected Daedra worship in favor of the divines. After years of struggle, Alessia succeeded in overthrowing the Ayleid hegemonies and established the first human empire of Cyrodiil in the year 1 E243. As the first ruler of this new empire, she was also the first to light the dragonfires in fulfillment of her covenant with Akatosh. This ritual would be repeated by every legitimate emperor or empress at their coronation for thousands of years to come, a sacred duty that maintained the mystical barriers between worlds. The amulet itself is both simple and extraordinary in its appearance. At its center lies the large red diamond, the Shim El Adabal, as it is called in ancient texts, said to be a drop of crystallized divine blood from Akatosh himself. This central stone glows with an inner light that seems to pulse like a heartbeat when worn by one of true dragon blood. Surrounding this central gem are 8 smaller stones, each representing one of the 8 divines who formed the original pantheon of the empire. The entire arrangement is set in an elaborate gold setting, crafted with such artistry that some scholars believe it must have been created by divine hands rather than mortal ones. The gold itself never tarnishes or dulls, maintaining its luster through thousands of years and countless coronations. When worn by a true Septim emperor, one of the dragon blood, the amulet is said to glow with inner fire. It becomes warm to the touch, but never hot enough to burn. Those sensitive to magicka report feeling a distinct humming or vibration when in its presence, as though the amulet itself were alive with power. What few outside the inner circles of imperial power know is that the amulet also serves as a repository of sorts, a vessel containing a fragment of the soul of each emperor who has worn it. This spiritual connection is what allows the extraordinary moment you witness in the Temple of the One, but we shall come to that part of our tale later. For now, know that the amulet is more than merely symbolic. It is a living connection between the dragonborn emperors, Akatosh, and the very fabric of reality that separates Mundus from Oblivion. At the heart of the imperial city stands the Temple of the One, a circular structure with an open ceiling through which the sky is visible. In its center burns the eternal flame known as the Dragonfires, or rather, they should burn eternally, were it not for the transitions between emperors. When an emperor dies, the Dragonfires go out. During this period, the barriers between worlds grow thin, not enough for full invasion, but enough that Daedric influence can seep through more easily. This is why the coronation of a new emperor is not merely political, but cosmically urgent. Until a new dragonborn emperor lights the fires while wearing the Amulet of Kings, Tamriel remains vulnerable. The ritual itself is deceptively simple. The new emperor, having proven their dragonblood heritage by wearing the amulet, approaches the unlit central fire pit in the Temple of the One. There, with the amulet at their throat, they ignite the dragonfires with a special ceremonial flame. At the moment of lighting, witnesses describe a momentary ripple that passes through reality, felt rather than seen, as the barriers between worlds are reinforced. This system of protection, the Covenant, the Amulet, the Dragonfires, served as Tamriel's primary defense against Daedric invasion for thousands of years. It is no wonder then that Mehrunes Dagon and his Mythic Dawn cultists focused their efforts on breaking this ancient pact. With the assassination of Emperor Uriel Septim VII and his known heirs, the Dragonfires remained unlit longer than at any time since the interregnum of the Second Era. The theft of the amulet itself was an unprecedented catastrophe. Without it, even a surviving heir of the Dragonblood could not renew the covenant with Akatosh. This was the true crisis at the heart of the Oblivion invasion. Not merely the death of an emperor, but the theft of the divine protection that had sheltered Tamriel for millennia. Not just anyone could wear the Amulet of Kings and light the dragonfires. The covenant required that the ruler be of the dragon blood, a direct descendant of Alessia, who carried within them a spark of divine essence from Akatosh himself. This divine heritage manifested in various ways throughout history. Some emperors were said to have unusual longevity, resistance to disease, or the ability to see glimpses of possible futures. The term dragonborn has caused some confusion among scholars, as it has been used in different contexts throughout Tamriel's history. In the specific context of the Septim dynasty, it referred to those who carried the blood of Tiber Septim, himself a dragonborn of a special kind, who later ascended to godhood as Talos. Whether all who could wear the amulet possessed the ability to absorb dragon souls, as legends claim the dragonborn of Nordic prophecy could do, remains a matter of scholarly debate. What we do know is that the Septim bloodline was guarded jealously throughout the centuries. The Blades, the Emperor's elite bodyguards, maintained secret records of legitimate and illegitimate children of the royal line, ensuring that should catastrophe strike, an heir could always be found to maintain the covenant. This explains their knowledge of Martin, the hidden son of Uriel Septim VII, who had been raised in anonymity for his own protection. The fact that Martin could wear the amulet proved his heritage beyond any doubt, as the gem was said to slip from the neck of any who lacked the dragon blood. There are tales of pretenders throughout history who attempted to claim the throne by wearing a counterfeit amulet. only to be exposed when asked to don the true Amulet of Kings. The culmination of the amulet's long history occurs in the climactic moments of the Oblivion Crisis, when Mehrunes Dagon himself managed to physically enter Mundus, something that should have been impossible while the Covenant stood. All seemed lost. The barriers between worlds had been broken beyond apparent repair. In that moment of ultimate crisis, Martin Septim, the last of the Dragonblood, made a decision that would forever alter the nature of Tamriel's protection against oblivion. Recognizing that the old covenant had failed, he shattered the Amulet of Kings in the Temple of the One, releasing the accumulated divine power of generations of dragonborn emperors, along with his own life force and the blood of Akatosh contained within the gem. The result was the manifestation of Akatosh himself in the form of a great dragon of light who battled Mehrunes Dagon in the ruins of the temple. When the conflict ended, Dagon was banished back to oblivion, and the dragon god turned to stone, becoming the great dragon statue that now stands in the Temple of the One, a permanent monument to sacrifice and divine protection. With this act, the nature of the barrier between Mundus and oblivion was forever changed. No longer dependent on an amulet or the lighting of fires, the barrier became permanent. Martin Septim's sacrifice, ensuring that never again would Tamriel face the threat of direct Daedric invasion. As you drift closer to sleep, consider the poignant symmetry of the amulet story. Created from the blood of a god to forge a covenant with a mortal empress, and return to that god through the sacrifice of her last descendant. The Amulet of Kings, that small red gem that passed briefly through your hands, contained within it the destiny of an empire, the protection of a world, and ultimately the seeds of its own transcendence. The ruby stone is gone now, but the protection it once symbolized endures in a new and more permanent form. And somewhere in the cosmic tapestry that binds Akatosh to Mundus, perhaps some essence of all those dragonborn emperors, Alessia, Raymond, Tiber, Uriel, and Martin, continues to watch over the realm. They each, in their time, gave everything to protect. The events of the Oblivion Crisis profoundly transformed religious life in Cyrodiil. The apparent failure of the divines to prevent the initial invasion led some to question their faith, but Martin Septim's ultimate sacrifice, channeling the power of Akatosh to banish Mehrunes Dagon, provided a powerful reaffirmation of divine protection. In the aftermath, theological understanding evolved to incorporate these events. The destruction of the Amulet of Kings and the manifestation of Akatosh as a dragon of light in the Temple of the One created a new, permanent barrier between Mundus and oblivion, no longer dependent on mortal emperors maintaining the dragonfires. Pilgrims began traveling to the Temple of the One to view the dragon statue, the physical manifestation of Akatosh that remained after the battle with Mehrunes Dagon. New religious artwork depicting Martin Septim's sacrifice appeared in temples throughout the province, often showing him surrounded by divine light as he shattered the Amulet of Kings. Perhaps most significantly, the 9 divines were no longer seen as distant, abstract entities, but as active participants in the survival of the mortal realm. The concrete, visible intervention of Akatosh renewed faith in divine protection and led to a religious revival that would continue for decades following the crisis. As you drift towards sleep, imagine walking the roads of Cyrodiil, passing roadside shrines where travelers leave small offerings, hearing temple bells marking the hours in cities and villages, seeing the subtle influence of divine worship woven into the fabric of everyday life. The 9 divines stand as silent guardians over the empire, their presence felt in both grand cathedrals and quiet moments of personal devotion. In this way, the faith of Cyrodiil is both simple and profound, acknowledging divine power while celebrating mortal potential, offering cosmic explanations while providing practical guidance for daily life. It is a faith that has weathered crisis and emerged, transformed, but unbroken, much like the province of Cyrodiil itself. Martin Septim, the hidden heir. As we continue our journey through the mists of time that preceded the Oblivion Crisis, let us turn our attention to perhaps the most poignant figure in this grand tale, Martin Septim, the hidden heir whose destiny would remain unknown, even to himself, until the very moment when all of Tamriel needed him most. Close your eyes and let us explore the quiet life of the man who was born to imperial legacy, but raised in humble obscurity, only to ultimately make the greatest sacrifice imaginable. The story of Martin Septim begins with secrecy and shadows, as do many tales of princes hidden from those who would harm them. In an unknown year of Emperor Uriel Septim, the 7th's reign, a child was born away from the gleaming spires of the imperial palace. Unlike his legitimate half-brothers, this child's birth was recorded in no official chronicle, celebrated with no royal announcement, marked by no distribution of alms to the poor in the emperor's name. The circumstances of Martin's conception remain shrouded in mystery. Some court historians suggest he was born to a minor noblewoman with whom the emperor formed a brief attachment during his middle years. Others whisper of a palace servant who caught the emperor's eye. The most romantic tales speak of a true love kept secret from the political machinations of the Elder Council. Whatever the truth, we know that Uriel acknowledged his paternity, if only to a select few he trusted beyond all others. The woman who bore Martin did not live long after his birth. Whether from complications of childbirth or other causes, records are unclear. What we do know is that the infant Martin, carrying the dragon blood of the Septim line, though he would not know it for decades to come, was taken from the imperial city in the dead of night by agents of the Blades, those sworn protectors of the dragon-blooded line. The Blades, ever vigilant in their protection of the Septim bloodline, arranged for the infant Martin to be adopted by a humble couple in the countryside of Colovian West Weald. Far from the imperial city, in a small farming community near the border of Valenwood, young Martin was raised by foster parents who knew nothing of his true heritage. They were told only that he was an orphan of noble blood who needed protection from unnamed enemies. Martin's adoptive father was a farmer who supplemented his income by trapping and selling pelts in the local market town. His adoptive mother kept house, tended a small vegetable garden, and was known locally for her skill in brewing healing tonics from garden herbs. They were kind, hard-working people who raised the boy as their own, instilling in him values of honesty, diligence, and compassion that would serve him well throughout his life. Young Martin was an unusually bright child who learned to read before the age of 5, a remarkable achievement in a rural community where literacy was uncommon. A traveling priest of Akatosh, making his rounds to the outlying communities too small to maintain their own chapels, noticed the boy's intelligence and began bringing him books on his monthly visits. These precious volumes, histories, theological treatises, even basic alchemical texts, became Martin's windows to a world beyond the fields and forests of his home. As a boy, Martin would often climb the tallest tree near his home. A massive oak that local tradition held was sacred to Kinnereth. From this perch, he could see for miles across the countryside and would sometimes spot the distant spires of Kvatch on the clearest days. Little did he know that City would one day become his home, and later, the site of unimaginable destruction connected to his true identity. The Blades maintained a distant watch over the boy throughout his childhood. Disguised as traveling merchants or pilgrims, agents would pass through the village every few months, observing from a distance to ensure his safety without revealing their purpose or his importance. Sometimes they would speak with him briefly, asking casual questions about his life and studies, their true interest hidden behind friendly smiles. As Martin entered adolescence, strange occurrences began to manifest around him. During a particularly harsh winter, when he was 13, he fell through ice into a freezing pond. Witnesses later reported that the water around him seemed to steam and boil as he struggled, allowing him to survive until rescue came, though he had no memory of this himself. On another occasion, when a neighbor's house caught fire during a summer drought, Martin ran toward the blaze to help, and the winds suddenly shifted, driving the flames away from where he stood. These events were attributed to the blessings of the divines by local villagers, but they were in fact the first manifestations of Martin's innate magical talent, a gift often strong in those of the dragon blood. Though Martin had no formal magical training, his abilities continued to develop instinctively. He found he could ease pain with a touch, sense approaching storms before any visible signs appeared, and calm frightened animals with his mere presence. Around his 16th year, Martin began to experience vivid dreams of dragons in flight, of crowned figures he had never met, of a great city of white stone centered around a tower that reached to the heavens. Unknown to him, these were not mere flights of fancy, but echoes of his heritage, fragments of racial memory carried in his very blood. The Blades agent who visited during this period noted these developments in coded messages sent back to Cloud Ruler Temple, the secret fortress of the Order in the northern mountains. It was also during these adolescent years that Martin first encountered the temptations that would later lead him down darker paths. A peddler passing through the village sold him a small book of minor conjuration spells, presented as harmless tricks and cantrips. Martin's natural magical aptitude allowed him to master these simple spells quickly, kindling a fascination with the magical arts that would eventually lead him far from his pastoral home. At 17, Martin's quiet life in the countryside came to an end. A fire, believed by locals to have been started by lightning, though later Blades records suggest more sinister origins, claimed the lives of his adoptive parents, while Martin was away studying with the priest of Akatosh in a neighboring village. The priest, a kind but elderly man, offered to take Martin as his apprentice, but the young man's grief drove him to seek a different path. With nothing but a small inheritance, a few books, and the clothes on his back, Martin set out for the imperial city, drawn perhaps by those dream visions of towers and crowned figures, or perhaps simply by the natural desire of youth to seek wider horizons. The Blades, ever watchful, noted his departure, but made no move to stop him. Perhaps they reasoned that a young man of his age needed to find his own way, or perhaps they believed the anonymity of the great city would provide even better cover than a rural village. What they could not have anticipated was how completely Martin would disappear into the labyrinthine streets and social underworld of the imperial city. For nearly 2 years, the Blades lost track of him entirely, an unprecedented failure that caused great concern within the Order. When they finally located him again, he had changed dramatically from the earnest, studious boy they had watched over for so many years. The imperial city, in the latter years of the Third Era, was a place of wonder and danger in equal measure. For a provincial youth with magical talent, but no formal training or social connections, the glittering promises of the arcane university remained frustratingly out of reach. Instead, Martin found himself drawn to less reputable practitioners of the magical arts, hedge wizards, street conjurers, and self-proclaimed mystics who operated on the margins of imperial society. Through these connections, Martin eventually encountered a group that would change the course of his life, a small cult dedicated to the study of Daedric magic that promised knowledge without the restrictions and moral limitations imposed by the Mages Guild. To a young man grieving his parents, frustrated by institutional barriers, and possessing untrained magical power, their offer proved irresistible, and under their tutelage, Martin's magical abilities flourished, but at a cost to his spirit and conscience. For nearly 3 years, Martin descended deeper into Daedric magic, moving from simple conjurations to more complex and morally questionable ritualistic practices. He would later confess to the hero of Kvatch that he had done many things during this period that he deeply regretted, though he never specified exactly what these acts entailed. Court records from the imperial city during this period mention a series of mysterious events: strange lights seen above certain districts at night, unexplained fires, people reporting lost time or bizarre visions that some scholars have connected to the activities of Martin's cult. The exact nature of the incident that finally jarred Martin from this dark path remains unclear. In his rare references to this period of his life, Martin spoke only of a summoning gone wrong and the cost of arrogance. What we do know is that whatever occurred was catastrophic enough to claim the lives of several of his fellow cultists, and destructive enough to require the intervention of the Imperial Guard. In the aftermath, a shattered Martin fled the Imperial city, his conscience awakened to the dangers of the path he had been following, and his heart heavy with guilt over the consequences of his actions. He wandered the roads of Cyrodiil for months, working as a labourer or healer when he could find such work, sleeping under hedges when he could not. It was during this period of homeless penitence that he first encountered the teachings of Akatosh in a new and more profound way. The Chapel of Akatosh in Kvatch was not the largest or most famous temple in Cyrodiil, but it had a reputation for welcoming those seeking redemption. The priests there asked few questions about the past and focused instead on the potential for future service and atonement. When a bedraggled Martin arrived at their doors in the winter of 396, they offered him shelter without demanding his story. It was Primate Savlian Matthias, then a young priest rather than the guard captain he would later become, who first recognized Martin's potential and encouraged him to stay beyond his initial few nights of shelter. Seeing both the young man's obvious education and his equally obvious inner turmoil, Matthias suggested that service to others might help heal whatever wounds Martin carried. Within 2 years, Martin had taken preliminary vows as a priest of Akatosh. The irony of the hidden Septim heir, carrying the blood of Akatosh according to imperial tradition, unknowingly serving as a priest of that same divine would not be lost on later historians. His fellow priests noted his particular devotion to the concept of time as a path to redemption, the core teaching that Akatosh offers all beings the opportunity to change their course as long as they draw breath. Martin's skill as a healer and his genuine compassion for those suffering eventually made him beloved in Kvatch and the surrounding region. Unlike some priests who maintained a certain distance from their flock, Martin was known to sit for hours with the sick, to visit the homes of the troubled, and to offer counsel to all who sought it, regardless of their station. If he maintained certain secrets about his past, his present actions spoke clearly of a man dedicated to making amends through service. The Blades, who had relocated Martin after his departure from the Imperial City, maintained their distant watch, but made no move to interfere with his new life. Regular reports were sent to Emperor Uriel, who is said to have taken particular interest in his hidden son's spiritual development. One account suggests that the Emperor, disguised as a simple traveler, once visited the Chapel of Akatosh specifically to receive a blessing from Martin, though this story may be apocryphal. As the Third Era drew toward its close and Martin entered his early 30s, the dreams that had troubled his adolescence returned with new intensity. Now they included visions of fire raining from red skies, of strange gates opening between worlds, and most disturbingly, of a white-haired emperor falling beneath assassins' blades. Given his position as a priest of Akatosh, god of time and prophetic vision, Martin interpreted these as symbolic warnings rather than literal foretellings. In the months immediately preceding the Oblivion Crisis, Martin began keeping a dream journal, recording these visions in detail and attempting to interpret their meaning through prayer and meditation. This journal, preserved in the Imperial archives, reveals his growing unease about the future without any recognition of his personal connection to the events he foresaw. One entry, dated just 3 weeks before Emperor Uriel's assassination, reads, "Again the dream of the fallen emperor, his blood pooling beneath him like a red dragon. Above him stands a figure holding a broken amulet, surrounded by flame. I pray to Akatosh for clarity, but the meaning remains obscured, as though I am seeing through a veil that only death will lift." Martin shared these troubling visions with Primate Ilav Dralganer, the head of the Chapel of Akatosh in Kvatch. The older priest, recognizing something prophetic in Martin's dreams, encouraged him to continue his documentation, but cautioned him against speaking too openly about them to avoid causing public alarm. This well-intentioned advice meant that when the crisis finally arrived, the warning contained in Martin's visions went largely unheeded. The eve of crisis. In the final days before the Oblivion Gates opened, Martin was described by those who knew him as increasingly withdrawn and troubled. He spent long hours in prayer at the chapel's altar, sometimes forgetting to eat or sleep. His healing work continued, but those who received his ministrations noted a new urgency in his manner, as though he sensed their time together might be limited. On what would prove to be the last normal day in Kvatch's history, Martin delivered a sermon that several survivors later recalled as eerily prescient. Concerning Alessia's covenant with Akatosh, he spoke of how divine protection often requires mortal sacrifice, and how salvation frequently comes from unexpected quarters. The divines work through the most unlikely instruments, he told his congregation. Look to the forgotten corners, the overlooked spaces, for there you may find your deliverance when darkness falls. That night, as most of Kvatch slept peacefully for the last time, Martin remained awake in the chapel, kneeling before the altar of Akatosh. A young acolyte who rose early found him still there at dawn, seemingly in a trance-like state of prayer. When roused, Martin appeared momentarily confused, as though waking from a deep dream. "It begins today," he reportedly said, though he could not or would not explain what he meant. Hours later, as night fell once more, the skies above Kvatch turned crimson. The great Oblivion Gate opened before the city walls, and Mehrunes Dagon's Daedric forces poured through. In the chaos and destruction that followed, Martin worked tirelessly to save as many lives as possible, guiding refugees to the chapel, which briefly became a sanctuary amidst the flames. He could not have known that among those fleeing the burning city would come a prisoner recently escaped from the Imperial dungeons, the future hero of Kvatch, carrying news of an emperor's dying words and a destiny that would transform the humble priest into Tamriel's last, best hope. And so we find Martin Septim on the eve of his discovery, a man who had walked through darkness and found his way to light, who had rejected power in favor of service, who had spent his life running from a destiny that would ultimately find him regardless. The hidden heir, the priest of Akatosh, the scholar of Daedric lore, the healer of Kvatch, all these aspects of Martin would prove essential in the crisis to come. As you drift towards sleep, consider how the threads of Martin's life, his unknown imperial heritage, his magical aptitude, his experience with Daedric forces, his spiritual devotion to Akatosh, and his hard-won wisdom regarding the seductive nature of power, wove together to create exactly the leader Tamriel needed in its darkest hour. Not a warrior emperor like Tiber Septim, but a reluctant ruler whose compassion, knowledge, and ultimate sacrifice would save the world he had come to love. As our journey through the twilight hours of the Third Era draws to a close, let us pause to reflect on the tapestry of events, individuals, and cosmic forces that set the stage for the crisis you experienced firsthand, like stars forming constellations in the night sky. These separate elements connect to form a picture of a world poised on the edge of transformation. We began with the ending of Morrowind's tale, the defeat of Dagoth-Ur, and the fading power of the Tribunal. In those cracks and fissures, the watchful eyes of Daedric princes, particularly Mehrunes Dagon, saw opportunity after centuries of patience. We explored the nature of that ambitious prince, Mehrunes Dagon, Lord of Destruction, whose desire to invade Tamriel was not merely destructive, but transformative in his view. A being of almost incomprehensible age and power, who saw in the mortal realm not something to be simply destroyed, but remade according to his vision of revolution and change. In Mankar Cameron and his Mythic Dawn cult, Dagon found willing instruments, mortals who believed they were working toward transcendence rather than devastation. Through their hidden works and secret rituals, they prepared the way for their master's arrival, spreading like quiet shadows through the provinces of the empire. Standing against these gathering forces, though he knew it not, was Emperor Uriel Septim VII, an aged ruler troubled by prophetic dreams and visions of his own demise. We traced his long reign from youthful promise through the deception of the imperial simulacrum to his final wisdom-filled years. A complex man who, sensing the approach of darkness, set in motion contingencies that would bear fruit only after his passing. Central to those plans and to the ancient protections of Tamriel was the Amulet of Kings, that blood-red gem containing the divine essence of Akatosh himself. We discovered how this artifact, created in covenant with Saint Alessia, served as the physical manifestation of the barrier between Mundus and Oblivion, its power renewed with each dragonfire lighting by emperors of the dragon blood. We contemplated the 9 divines, whose influence permeated every aspect of imperial culture and whose subtle guidance remained present even as their protection was tested. From Akatosh's dominion over time to Stendarr's balance of justice and mercy, these divine forces shaped the world in ways both seen and unseen, preparing the faithful for trials to come. And perhaps most poignantly, we followed the hidden journey of Martin Septim, from secret imperial birth through dark paths of Daedric experimentation to redemptive service as a humble priest. Unknowing heir to a threatened throne, his unique combination of imperial blood, magical knowledge, spiritual devotion, and hard-won wisdom made him the perfect counterweight to the forces gathering against Tamriel. As you drift toward the shores of sleep, imagine Tamriel in those final months before the crisis began, a world balanced on the edge between one era and the next. The golden light of the Third Era's long afternoon was fading, casting longer shadows across the land. In towns and cities across Cyrodiil, ordinary people continued their daily lives, unaware of the cosmic drama about to unfold around them. In the imperial city, aging Emperor Uriel walked the palace corridors at night, troubled by dreams he could not fully interpret. In a mountain stronghold far to the north, the Blades maintained their vigilant watch, sensing approaching danger, but unable to name it. In hidden shrines beneath ordinary homes, the Mythic Dawn whispered promises of a new dawn to eager converts. And in Kvatch, a city soon to become synonymous with destruction and resilience, a priest named Martin knelt before the altar of Akatosh, praying for guidance as visions of fire and blood troubled his sleep. None of these individuals, not even the Emperor himself, could see the complete pattern forming around them. Each held only fragments of a truth that would soon reveal itself in flame and sacrifice. This is the true power of the Elder Scrolls world that has captured the imagination of so many. The sense that history is not simply a sequence of events, but a complex weaving of divine will, mortal choice, prophecy, and chance. The Oblivion Crisis you experienced in the game was not merely a sudden catastrophe, but the culmination of forces set in motion generations earlier. As sleep approaches, let the landscapes of Cyrodiil drift through your mind. The rolling hills of the West Weald, where young Martin played as a child, the gleaming spires of the Imperial City, where Uriel contemplated the future of his dynasty, the rugged mountains where the Blades maintained their ancient vigil. Imagine the night sky above Tamriel, with the moons Massa and Secunda casting their otherworldly light across forests and plains. Somewhere in that vast expanse, the barriers between worlds are beginning to thin, but for this moment, there is still peace. The dragonfires, though extinguished, have protected the realm for thousands of years, and the legacy of that protection lingers like the warmth of embers in a hearth. Think of the chapel in Kvatch, where Martin tended to his flock, unaware of his imperial heritage. Picture the Temple of the One in the Imperial City, where soon a sacrifice would transform a mortal into the avatar of a god. Envision the hidden shrine where Mankar Cameron translated the Mysterium Xarxes, its pages glowing with forbidden knowledge. All of these places, all of these people, connected by invisible threads of destiny, moving inexorably toward the moment when you would step from a prison cell into legend. The beauty of this story lies not just in the epic confrontation between Akatosh and Mehrunes Dagon, but in all the quiet moments that made that confrontation possible. Choices made in shadow and light, acts of devotion and defiance, steps taken on paths unknown. As we conclude our journey through the prelude to oblivion, let the weight of history and destiny dissolve into the approaching realm of dreams. The tales of emperors and Daedra, of hidden heirs and ancient amulets, will be waiting for you when you return to the waking world. For now, let your mind wander the peaceful roads of Cyrodiil before the storm, past roadside shrines where travelers leave offerings to the Nine, through forests where deer move silently between ancient trees, alongside streams that flow from the Geril Mountains to the Niben Bay. The story you know from playing Oblivion awaits in the future of this world, but for now, there is only the gentle turning of Akatosh's endless wheel of time. Allow your breathing to find the rhythm of this sleeping world. With each breath, imagine traveling deeper into the peace that existed before the crisis began. The Mythic Dawn is still gathering in shadow. Martin still tends to his quiet duties in Kvatch. Emperor Uriel still walks the palace corridors, guarded by loyal blades. And somewhere, in a prison cell that will soon open, destiny waits to begin its work. But all of that is for another time. For now, there is only rest. May Mara grant you peaceful dreams. May Dibella bring you visions of beauty. May Kinnereth's gentle breath carry you to lands of wonder. And may Vermina, mistress of dreams herself, be kind in her nocturnal gifts. Sleep now, traveler. The road to Kvatch, the gates of oblivion, the temple of the One, all will be waiting when you choose to return. For now, let the stories of Tamriel guide you to sweet and restful slumber, where perhaps you too might dream of dragons and emperors, of ancient magic and worlds beyond the stars.